Hi everyone, this is Governor John Carney. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the virtual celebration of the Compassionate Champion Award winners. I'm very disappointed that we're not able to come together in person this year, but I'm glad that we could gather virtually. I know we have many dedicated folks watching who serve their fellow Delawareans and who have been leaders and advocates in the trauma-informed approach. Thank you for joining us. By making Delaware a trauma-informed state, we're educating and transforming lives in our communities. We're becoming a more understanding and compassionate state. We are providing better services to our neighbors and families across Delaware. Now we are excited to announce the recipients of our second annual Compassionate Champion Awards, the state's Trauma-Informed Care Recognition Program. Congratulations and thank you for your compassion, leadership, and commitment to our state and our citizens. By addressing these issues as a community, we're helping Delaware become a stronger and healthier state. And so congratulations again to the individuals and teams we're celebrating, and thank you for your important work.
When I think of trauma-informed care, trauma-informed approaches, I think about understanding the prevalence of trauma and the impact that trauma has on individual social and emotional well-being. And then we use that knowledge and that understanding to respond to individuals perhaps in a different way than we used to, respond to them in a way that promotes connection and recovery and healing. And I think that, sometimes that's where we didn't do it always that way before. We assume things about people's behavior instead of really understanding the reasons why an individual is behaving a certain way.
I think that we can never start talking about our emotions at too young of an age, and that's why this work is especially critical at elementary schools, teaching children how to identify their emotions and then how to handle them, really. The key to that is normalizing negative emotions. Just saying to kids, it's okay to have negative emotions. You're going to have them. Adults have them. But here's what we do when they surface.
We try to first form a relationship with all of our students and try to get to that a deeper connection and try to figure out why some of these behaviors are happening or how we could best support them. And talk with them. There's consequences to decisions that are made, but those are decisions and they're not the people, and we want to help the people as much as we can.
Because overall they've done so much trauma work in the building over the last couple of years, I've seen definitely a decrease in the daily crises that we have, because overall everyone's calmer, the hallways are calmer, the teachers are responding to the children differently.
If they have this understanding of trauma and crisis and have the ability to connect with resource, that trust instantly can happen. When a person feels that you really care about them and you're not bothering them and they don't feel belittled, that's when that partnership and that empowerment happens that can literally change individuals' lives.
Hello to all my Compassionate Champion Award future winners out there. My name is Michelle Savage. I'm the principal at Shumadale Middle School. We were a Compassionate Champion Award winner last year. Probably one of my most proudest awards that we have received because this work is everything. And so they've asked me today to talk to you about trauma and what we've learned over the last year, which all brings a giggle because if we haven't learned, we've learned so much over this last year. And my biggest thing is that we have learned that all the work that we did was so important and paid off so much during this time. So many years ago when I started here at SHU, about 7.5 years ago, we knew that we needed to work on climate. And I, being a documentary junkie, had just heard all about paper tigers and trauma work, and actually went to go see a screening of that and then brought it back to my staff. And we started to realize that part of some of the struggles that we would have with students were a lack was a lack of understanding on our part as to why they were reacting the way they did based on the trauma that they had been through. So we started out just introducing trauma to our staff, thinking about even their own selves and their own mental health and self-care and what that meant when you're dealing with a lot of trauma. And then looking at the brain and what that means for our students, and playing things like the brain game and realizing if they don't have those supports and connections, their brain isn't going to grow. And how can we help that? So we went from being trauma aware to trauma informed, and became a school that lived by Maslow before Bloom. In fact, we just read this book this summer, and we've been working with Dr. Brian Perlman on becoming a distinguished mental health school, as well as making relationships #1 and realizing that it is connections before content. So that has become part of who we are. So even if you're a new staff member coming in, you feel that as our main focus, our vibe, our vision, everything right there. And I think that was the key to being successful in the spring and having a successful start this fall. My teachers understood that they had to build those relationships first. So in the spring, we were lucky because we already knew the students very well, had formed relationships and trust. So when it came to spring and our kids would be going through things, they would reach out to us and let us know so that we could provide them with an intervention, a strategy, a support for them during a very trying time, as these times have been the hardest of my career, and I'm in 26 years now. Then the fall came a new challenge, because now you've got to develop relationships with students that you have not connected to before, and the staff really focused on making sure that they were building relationships and trust with students who didn't know them from before, and how could they do that online, and how would that work. And the work never ends. We actually have 3 book studies that we're getting ready to do for our staff to pick from, Teaching with Love and Logic, Deepest Well, as well as Relationship, Responsibility, and Regulation. These are all 3 books that some of our staff are going to delve into, so our work never ends. We will never say we're the experts, because there's always room to learn more. So I'd like to congratulate you all, because in receiving this award, it means you took the journey on making trauma important and a priority at your school or your organization. So kudos to you. And I guarantee that when it comes to a time of crisis like what we've been through, it is going to pay off and you're going to find success.
Trauma-informed care is changing the question when we care for one another from what is the problem with you to what happened to you. And this is, it seems like an intuitive and it seems like something that makes sense to us, but in reality, so much of healthcare, at least, is oriented around diseases. It's oriented around problems. And so a lot of the times when we approach patients, when we approach people in general, we become so focused on what the problem is with the person that we may not really dig into or get to know them as people. And as people, we're defined by our experiences in life. We're defined by the things that happen to us that are both good and bad. And what trauma-informed care does is it helps the caregivers, those that are responsible for taking care of other people, to recognize that a lot of the influences on who a person is, how they have become that person, and even the problems that they come to us seeking help for are shaped by things in their past, many of which are traumatic experiences. The area that I became particularly focused on was firearm violence and prevention there. And there are many dimensions to that. A lot of my focus on this came from time that I had spent during my training, actually living in the city of Wilmington. And I lived in a neighborhood of the north side out on Pine Street, where there was a lot of trauma that was going on. I think what we recognize most readily are things like firearm violence, the gunshots that we hear on a regular basis on the block in the neighborhood. But a lot of the not so loud things that go on as well as traumatic experiences of exposure. And seeing how deeply that affected the lives of my neighbors, which means the lives of our communities, the lives of our patients, and even for myself in experiences such as literally going outside my door and holding pressure on a gunshot wound that was there in the street on multiple occasions. As one example, and one recent piece of research that was out there is if you have two patients in the trauma bay who have the same severity of injury, one from a motor vehicle accident and one from a gunshot wound, looking at how they do moving several months out from the injury, those who have had gunshot wounds are more likely to experience pain, and they're more likely to have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, even given the same severity of injury. And part of that speaks to that the mechanism of trauma matters. And we understand that intuitively on a personal level. How we're injured and how we're hurt has an impact on how we understand and we see the world, whether it's we see the world as a safe place or whether we see it as a threatening place to us. And that then has ripple effects as to how we then interact with other people around us, the systems that care and other things happen through, as well as just our responses even to ourselves and our own emotions.
I would say one of the big impacts that it has made in being able to equip staff in our building, in any of the buildings I'm in, with the tools. It answers the why. While we had many different packages on different strategies to use and everything, the brain science gives us the why, because we have to meet the child, each child, where they're at. And it also gives us information on where we're at. So I'm going to say it this way. If we have a flipped out brain and the adult response is another flipped out brain, all we have is a flipped out mess with everyone caught up in their feelings. So we have to regulate. Everyone has to regulate. An adult, you are the biggest piece of regulation. Having adults understand that they can step back. They need to, not can, they absolutely have to step back. They have to regulate before they can help this child get to that place of regulation. And it's about feeling felt. So when you walk into a room, you immediately, because we are built with electrical impulses, we feel our acceptance or not by others. And we feel it based on our own experientials that we bring into it. So what we feel, we may interpret a face that is stern as unsafe. The minute we feel it's unsafe, if we've had a lot of unsafe, we're reacting. If your face is stern today because you're in your head as the adult, because your car broke down on the way there or a check bounced or something, it's okay to somehow let your students know what the state is of you and that it's not them, so they can feel safe again. Otherwise, you risk activation, and they are reading it and they're making it the way we do, and especially as children, we make it all about us. It's not always all about us, but that's how it feels. And if that's how it feels to a child who's lived in unsafe and needed a skill set to get them out of there quickly, or who's quickly triggered into that survival brain, you have to notice that, noticing their being, and help them feel safe. So the training with the adults, which is another big piece of the trauma-informed work that I do, being part of the trauma-informed team here, and at the schools that I've supported, is a huge piece of the work that I do. COVID should have, and I think has, opened up in a lot of environments outside of the school the need to take care, to step back. It certainly slowed a lot of businesses down, but then in the slowing down or in the revamping, how have you moved towards taking care, creating a climate that recognizes that everyone needs the permission to be human and to understand that when we're not at our best, when we're dysregulated, we could be triggered. I know a lot of this sounds therapeutic, but understanding what's happening with you.
The mission of Project New Start is to combat violence and reduce recidivism. And we do that by assisting individuals as they transition out of prison, out of correctional institutions, back to their families, employment, and their communities. So as a trauma-informed organization, we now have a better understanding and recognition of the majority of the individuals that we serve have experienced adverse childhood or adult experiences. You know, it's made us shift our thinking from what's wrong with this person to what has happened to this person, and then building an environment that's safe, it's accommodating, that's welcoming, so that then we can address their needs. Developing the skill to view people through that trauma lens has really enhanced our ability to identify and then secure the specific support and interventions that they need. Also, as a result of our growth in the stages of trauma-informed care, we've discovered areas where we can really improve personally and as an organization so that we can increase the likelihood of success for the folks that we are serving. I would say also critically important is apply what you learn to yourself first, and then challenge each other every day to be better.
Trauma-informed care, in my mind, is recognizing the pervasiveness of trauma in our modern society and approaching everyone through those lenses. So being compassionate, understanding, having a perspective that may help us, meaning those of us who are mental health professionals, to better understand where a person might be coming from, why they may be reacting in the way that they do, and what may be influencing their behaviors. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and have done that work for many years now. My practice focuses primarily on children and adolescents, although we do see quite a bit adults in my practice as well. We are school-based mental health providers, so we see a lot of children in their school environment. We provide clinical services, not only to the children, but also to their families, which is why the whole trauma-informed model is important to us, because we help parents to understand not only what may be influencing their child's behavior and emotions, but also what the parent may have been through that's influencing their behaviors and emotions, so that we can stop the cycle of generational trauma. People who are looking to adapt a trauma-informed approach, if they take the education seriously it will transform how they interact with everyone, not just clients, but everyone. It lends a different understanding, which then enables us to be more compassionate. And for those of us who are mental health providers, it enables us to be way more effective, because we understand that when a child is having some difficulties, the importance of understanding what has this child been through, not what is wrong with this kid, but what have you been through? And the same thing with their parents.
Trauma-informed care, when we speak about trauma-informed care at the Bayard School, we essentially want our staff to know that our students are coming in with a background that is unimaginable. They're experiencing concerns outside of the classroom and the neighborhood that we can sometimes relate to. So what we do is we bring in professional development so that we can get a better understanding, the teachers can get a better understanding of how to relate to the students. And once we started to have those conversations, I believe that we received a good response from our staff to kind of buy into, okay, it's not me, it's not personal. This student is really struggling, and we need to find ways to connect with the student.
Trauma-informed practices and care really was appealing to me because the idea that we are focusing on the why are the students behaving the way that they're behaving, why are they making the choices that they're making.
My role is to connect with students, to make sure that that relationship is building with students, that I'm building a good, strong foundation with students, and getting a good understanding of the student holistically. Not just, this is my student and, you know, Margarita Smith, right? This is my student, Margarita Smith, whose father is deceased, whose mother has 4 children at home.
This experience with COVID has really opened up people's homes to us. We saw our students that came to our building and they brought that trauma with them, much like you carry a backpack, but for the first time through a computer lens, we're actually seeing the trauma that they're living in. We're seeing their homes, we're seeing the interactions that they have with their family, and we're really able to understand what their life is like. This access to the internet with technology and the portals that we use of Schoology and Zoom really has allowed our students to interact with us on a different level. Where previously, when students were having concerns or issues, they may act out, or they may tell a teacher that they needed, or a staff member they needed to speak with them on the side. Now they're able to send a message, send via Zoom chat, or send a message on Schoology and say, I don't want to show my camera because my parents are fighting and I don't want people to see that in my classroom. They're able to have that conversation with their teacher and really be able to say, okay, I need a minute. And you're able to accept that as a teacher and give them that minute, or offer them a breakout session, and really be there for your students in a way that's not out on parade. So COVID is really allowing us to interact with our students on a different level, and is really giving us a front seat to what traumas our students are really facing. In addition, we are seeing the opposite of students that don't have tech services or don't have access to the internet. And as a school, we are really trying to fill those gaps and meet the needs of our students where they are. And these are things that we didn't see when we had our students coming into the building every day. And so COVID has really opened our eyes to how much our students need us and where we need to continue to grow to meet their needs.
You have to really be very intentional on how you approach it, and how you make sure folks understand that, you know, we're not trying to make excuses for kids and for some of the things that kids do in terms of behaviors, but we're trying to make sure that people understand the why behind what folks are, what kids are doing. and then how we can help address those issues.
My team is responsible for connecting behavioral health services to youth in communities and schools. Our goal is to create trauma-responsive programs tailored to meet the specific needs of our partners and the children that they serve. COVID-19 has been quite the game changer. The stress of the pandemic, the catastrophic grief and loss, and the prescribed isolation has impacted many of us in really profound ways. At the beginning of the pandemic, we saw so many people go into survival mode. When a person is in survival mode, which is a stress response, it means self-preservation at all costs. That can prevent people from seeking mental health treatment because they're so focused on taking care of basic human needs like food, shelter, and safety. At the start of the pandemic, we saw a steep decline in families accessing mental health services, and yet we know this is probably a time when they needed them the most. Now, the pandemic has been going on for so long that people have exceeded their capacity to cope. Extending compassion and grace to ourselves and others is the only way that we're going to survive this public health crisis. My advice for organizations that are just getting started in their trauma-informed care journey, I want you to know that trauma-informed care isn't a fancy protocol. It's really a way of being with other people. Being trauma-informed means that you honor other people's feelings and experiences and are curious about how those experiences might have impacted them. Trauma-informed care means that you look for ways to connect with people in a really meaningful way.
In our detention centers, our team completes an intake process with every youth who enters the facility, whether it's their first time or they've been with us multiple times. And that includes trauma screenings as well as interviews where we discuss triggers for trauma, coping strategies that have been effective for that youth in the past. And then we can make referrals for trauma-focused treatment as appropriate from there. In the residential facilities, our team completes a full assessment for each youth, and that includes multiple trauma measures. We also conduct TGCTA, which is trauma and grief component therapy for adolescents, in a group format with our youth in the residential facilities. And as part of the training in that, we participate in regular consultation calls with one of the program developers. We also have a member of our team who is working to become certified as a trainer in Target, which is Trauma Affect Regulation Guide for Education and Therapy, which is another evidence-based trauma treatment. And as part of this, she has also worked very closely with one of the developers and has incorporated a component for training the staff in one of the residential facilities, and we've received a lot of positive feedback. Overall, every member of our team is highly skilled in at least one evidence-based model of trauma-informed care. And I think that this approach has helped us to serve, again, not only the youth that we work directly with, but their families and the other staff members who we work with as well. Trauma-informed care has had a huge impact on the work that we do in the facilities. It has given us opportunities to connect with the youth we serve as well as their families, which then improves family engagement in the youth's treatment. And this also helps the youth to increase a sense of psychological safety, which we know is very important for trauma-informed care. It has also contributed to changes in practices and procedures within our own group. So for example, now we screen for trauma for every resident who comes into one of the facilities, not select. And that has allowed us to more quickly connect our youth with trauma-informed practices, both within and outside of the facility and the community as well. Trauma-informed care has helped to lower the incidence of re-traumatization of youth, which then results in lower incidents and restraints in the facilities, which is always a positive thing. And I think it's helped staff across the facilities to become more aware of their own triggers and how they respond to youth, and it has helped us to collaborate with other staff members in the facilities in a more informed way as well. I think it's helped us, we serve a population, unfortunately, that everyone has experienced trauma, and some of these kids have really experienced things that we as adults couldn't cope with. So I think, incorporating trauma-informed care practices has helped us to better assist our youth with these tragedies. It's also helped us when, unfortunately, we've had losses of our youth once they return to the community, and really helped to make us more of a team, so that, when we have a loss like that, I'll have a psychologist in one facility calling the other facility saying, how can I help? What do you need? And I think that that is directly from trauma-informed care trainings and experiences that we've had. And I think it's very important to remember that this is not a one and done thing. Having one training for staff is not going to be enough. It's a process and it takes time.
Back in March, as things were happening rapidly and shutdowns were happening and schools were closing and people were concerned about coming to seek healthcare, we activated quickly to develop some materials for children and families about COVID-19, and you can access that on our website. So those are some materials directly for parents as well as for professionals to use in working with kids and families. Another thing that we did was we actually developed a questionnaire quickly to look at the extent to which families were being exposed to traumatic aspects of COVID. So what does that mean? Well, it means not just exposure in an infectious disease sense, but also, did you have a stay-at-home order? Did you have to stop working? Did you have somebody move back into the family home? Did you have to move? Did you lose your job? Et cetera. We think about all of those as exposures that could be potentially traumatic. And then in addition to that, how people perceive that impact. Both, I might add, from very negative to very positive. And perhaps another R to throw in the mix here is resilience. And we wanted to consider the fact that for some people, rising to the occasion and making the best of things and, sort of saying, having more time together as a family has its benefits as well as its downside, et cetera. But we wanted to be able to have a way to sort of, if you will, measure that and have some sense of how a given family might be experiencing COVID. The other big piece that I want to emphasize about COVID-19 in our work is that we were very concerned about the impact on healthcare providers. And, I'm sure we all saw the news stories and clips online of healthcare providers really struggling with the rapid increase in the number of patients, the very sick patients, the fears that they had about their own health and about potentially contaminating their own families. And so we developed a program very quickly that includes coping tools for healthcare providers. And we have done, we taped a webinar on that, and we have that accessible again through our website, and remain committed to that, as well as to the patients and families as we go forward through this.
Hi, I'm Tracy Quillen-Carney, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our virtual celebration. Please join me in congratulating and thanking our Compassionate Champion Award winners. Over the past few years, I've had the privilege to work with and learn from dedicated leaders in this field. The individuals and teams we applaud today are doing incredible work that serves us all, even with the additional obstacles posed by the pandemic. In fact, we know that the work to advance trauma-informed practices has never been more important. Trauma can derail lives, families, and communities. But as our award winners this year show us, if we are informed and responsive to each other, we can heal, grow, and move forward. Please visit our Trauma Informed Delaware website to find resources and tools that you can use at home and at work. We are in this together, again, now more than ever. And together, we can build a stronger Delaware. Thanks to everyone who is making a difference for the better, and take care.